Welcome to Module 09 of 12 of the CipherVibe Cybersecurity for Beginners course. Today we will make logging, monitoring, and threat detection understandable, practical, and connected to the rest of your learning path. Detection begins with a hypothesis about harmful behavior and the evidence that would distinguish it from normal activity. Collecting every event is not the goal. Defenders need trustworthy telemetry connected to decisions and response. The purpose of this lesson is not to memorize a collection of terms. It is to build a mental model you can apply when tools, platforms, and threats change. We will define the core ideas, walk through a repeatable defensive workflow, examine mistakes that frequently mislead beginners, design useful safeguards, and finish with a safe portfolio exercise. Throughout the course, remember that security work begins with authorization, scope, and evidence. Use the exercises only on local systems you own or environments you have explicit written permission to assess. Pause when you need to. Write concepts in your own words, record observations, and distinguish what the evidence proves from what you are merely assuming. That habit is more valuable than rushing through another tool demonstration. Start with 4 concepts that provide the vocabulary for logging, monitoring, and threat detection. First, useful sources include identity, endpoint, network, DNS, proxy, application, cloud control plane, and data access records. Second, a baseline describes expected behavior so unusual activity can be interpreted in context. Third, a detection hypothesis states the behavior, required telemetry, logic, likely benign causes, and triage steps. Fourth, MITRE ATT and CK provides a shared vocabulary for adversary tactics and techniques without replacing local threat modeling. Do not study these as isolated definitions. Ask which asset or business service is involved, where the relevant trust boundary sits, which identity performs the action, and what reliable evidence would show that the control worked. Security reasoning is a chain. Source evidence supports an observation. The observation supports a conclusion. The conclusion informs a proportionate decision. The decision has an owner, an expected result, and a way to verify it. When any link is missing, say so. A professional explanation can include uncertainty without becoming vague. For example, a network record may prove that 2 addresses communicated, but it may not prove which human initiated the action or whether the content was malicious. Use diagrams whenever a relationship is difficult to explain in a sentence. Mark identities, systems, data flows, boundaries, and controls. A simple, accurate diagram is more useful than a crowded picture that implies knowledge you do not have. Now turn the mental model into a repeatable workflow. First, choose a scenario such as phishing followed by suspicious account use. Second, map each attacker action to observable events and required fields. Third, write alert logic with thresholds, time windows, context, and known limitations. Fourth, test the hypothesis using safe simulated records or authorized lab activity. Fifth, triage alerts, preserve evidence, tune noise, and measure missed or delayed visibility. Before acting, define the objective, scope, owner, and success condition. Collect the smallest amount of trustworthy evidence needed to understand the situation. Preserve timestamps and sources so another person can follow your reasoning. Priorities should be explainable. Consider exposure, identity and privilege, sensitive data, business importance, exploit conditions, existing safeguards, reversibility, and confidence. A dramatic label should never replace that analysis. The workflow does not end when a command succeeds, a ticket closes, or a dashboard turns green. Verify the new state with fresh evidence. Check for recurrence and for side effects introduced by the change. Document the result in plain language: what you observed, what you concluded, what you changed, who approved it, what evidence confirms the outcome, and what uncertainty remains. This disciplined loop, observe, interpret, decide, act, verify, and learn, appears in every cybersecurity specialty. Understanding failure modes will protect you from attractive but unreliable shortcuts. First, a large log volume can hide missing critical fields, stale collection, or broken timestamps. Second, static thresholds produce noise when business behavior changes. Third, alerts without owners and response procedures become unattended technical debt. Fourth, overfitting to one simulation creates a rule that misses realistic variation. Fifth, sensitive logs create privacy and access risks of their own. These mistakes often share one cause: confusing an available signal with a complete explanation. A tool can report a finding, a successful action, or a score while important scope, context, ownership, and verification remain missing. Avoid absolute claims. Words such as secure, compromised, fixed, and compliant require scope and evidence. Prefer precise statements such as, "This control blocked the tested path under these conditions," or "The available records show this identity used the service," but do not identify the human operator. Also resist copying commands without understanding their inputs, outputs, permissions, and side effects. Run one controlled change at a time and record what happened. If an exercise does not behave as expected, that is useful evidence. Stop, inspect the environment, revise the hypothesis, and explain the difference. Good security work is not a performance of certainty, it is careful reasoning under imperfect information. Reliable security uses layers because no single control can prevent every failure. First, define required data fields, sources, retention, owners, and health indicators. Second, synchronize time and preserve source timestamps, identity, and provenance. Third, use layered detections across identity, endpoint, network, application, and cloud evidence. Fourth, attach triage steps, escalation criteria, and containment options to important alerts. Fifth, test detections continuously and govern access to sensitive telemetry. For each important risk, ask 5 questions. What makes the event less likely? What evidence would reveal it? Who can contain it? How will trustworthy operation be restored? Who owns the decision and accepts remaining risk? Least privilege applies to people, applications, devices, automation, data stores, and administrators. Access should be scoped, separated, monitored, reviewed, and removed when it is no longer needed. Every important control needs a test strategy. Include representative normal activity, negative cases, misuse, dependency failure, and rollback. A written policy is not evidence that a technical or operational control works. Design for humans. A safeguard that is impossible to use correctly will be bypassed. Provide safe defaults, understandable messages, usable recovery, and clear escalation. Finally, preserve the evidence trail from observation through decision, action, and verification. That history supports investigations, audits, lessons learned, and honest measurement. Finish the lesson by creating a portfolio artifact rather than merely watching another explanation. First, create sample sign-in, endpoint, and network records for a compromised account scenario. Second, build a simple timeline and identify evidence gaps. Third, write 3 detection hypotheses with required fields and benign explanations. Fourth, map the behavior to relevant ATT and CK techniques without trying to memorize the matrix. Fifth, deliver the hypotheses and a concise analyst triage guide. Keep the work bounded. Use local systems, fake data, and environments you own or are explicitly authorized to assess. Record the objective, environment, actions, observations, screenshots, errors, conclusions, and limitations. Useful measures for this topic include critical source coverage, collection freshness, alert precision, detection latency, and triage completion time. A useful measure has a precise definition, a trustworthy source, an owner, a review frequency, and a known limitation. Ask someone unfamiliar with the exercise to review your artifact. Can they understand the system, the evidence, the decision, and the remaining uncertainty without watching you perform the lab? When the answer is yes, you have created more than notes. You have evidence of professional reasoning and communication. Continue with the next module in the Cybersecurity for Beginners playlist and use the complete written curriculum at CipherVibe.com/news. CipherVibe is operated by Cloudsectech LLC. This video is general education, not legal, compliance, financial, or incident response advice. Never access, scan, or test a system without its owner's explicit written authorization.